You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, this is Mike Bolzer from All Things 3D, and this is a special edition. Why? Because I got the Note 7 in yesterday, a little bit later than my normal show on Fridays at 3D in Review. But I also received the new Gear VR, so I thought, hey, wouldn't it be a good chance, while I've got it fresh in my mind, to be able to actually show it off today and kind of give you my feedback on the device itself. So as you can see in the backdrop behind me, other than my good friend Chris, no, actually that's just a little replica of Chris. Chris is off on vacation, I guess a little mini vacation, and my little wife Siobhan there. A lot of little mini Siobhans. But besides that, there's a slew of Samsung phones. In particular, the one centered in the middle there is the new Note 7. So I guess we can start immediately kind of talking about what comes with the Note 7, go through some of the apps. I have it Chromecasted, so we should be able to actually view the screen itself, kind of look through the menus, and then hook it up to the new Gear VR, and then compare it with some of the other, what would you say, non-Gear VR, mobile VR devices, including my own NEODiVR uPLAy, and kind of, you know, see the pluses and minuses of each of those. So let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and reach out and pull out the box. So the box, and I will jump to my main screen here, is pretty straightforward. It's a nice clean design, very simple, basically the size of the phone itself. And you know, the box is kind of neat. It kind of opens up off to the side like that, and then, you know, like other phones, there's nothing really special about its packaging, but it's nice, simple, and obviously in this case black. I'm assuming that they'll all be black. But inside there it includes the power supply, which I've already taken out, and a few accessories which I thought were really cool. One of them being an adapter, because if you're familiar with looking at the Note 7, the Note 7 uses the new USB-C port, and no longer the micro USB, which a lot of people think is an advantage, and I would agree, because there's no way of putting it in backwards. So with that being the case, and let me make sure that I have this up so that you can see it. So they come in these little plastic bags. This is the USB to US standard USB, female to positive or male USB-C. There was a micro USB to USB-C. So that way, if you have a charger, you can continue to use it for either of those. It has a stylus remover. If you remember, the Note 7 is the Galaxy phone with the stylus. So this is the Note 7 here. And it has extra little nibs, which I think is kind of cool. So something else that I thought, and I'm wearing it because I've actually been using it, is its headset, I've actually been using with my old phone. Obviously the last time I had a pair of Samsung headset is when I had the Note 4, so they may have already made changes. But this is the new ones, and they have this nice little grippy, it's more likely a silicone, but it's a little tip that you put on the end of it, and you can plug them in your ears, and obviously I have to hear myself. But I think they feel, in my opinion, very comfortable. In fact, one of the reasons I use the monitor earbuds when I'm doing the show is because, as you can see, they're conformed the same way. So I kind of like that if you're into earbuds. But the cool thing is you still have an earphone jack, which obviously Samsung has bragged about. Now here's the previous version, which was more of a round plug, as you can see there. And you know, they work as well, but I like the new ones better. Again, they're not sophisticated, and they probably don't cost very much, but I do think that's, you know, an upgrade. And so it appears that Samsung does seem to
think about its customer and take feedback, and people have already made that suggestion. So other than that, the box is very simple. The other thing that you may or may not be aware of, and I'll go ahead and lift it up here, and actually I'll just jump back to my
main screen here, and we can just run it here. So one of the things that I noticed, if you can see on the edge here, there is a hole, and what this hole allows you to do is push out, and I left it upstairs, but essentially you can push it out to put in your SIM card, as well as, if you're not aware of it, a micro SD. And I've actually put in a 128 gigabyte, but there's a special going on that you can either get a Fitbit or a 256-bit, or excuse me, 256 gigabyte SD card, micro SD card from Samsung. I guess they're running a little special. Not that they need any reason for you to buy the Note 7 or any of their phones, but they are providing a special now. But you just push that out, and it's essentially a long plastic plate with two insets, one for the SIM card and one for the micro SD. You place those in it and then push it back in. And if your card's working, I actually bought a couple used one, and one didn't work from Amazon, so that's going back, but the other one did. The other thing to keep in note is that, no pun intended, to note is that it becomes mobile storage. It doesn't become like what's available in Marshmallow, the ability to, what do you want to call it, assign it as standard memory for apps and so forth. It only seems to assign it as mobile storage, so it's good for videos, so forth, but not apps. So that may be an issue or may not be, depending on your use. So again, let me put that there in front of it. As you can see there, it's very nice, but you already knew that because you've already looked at a similar, probably some other videos, and obviously it's been in the news. But I want to make some comparisons between different phones. Now this is, and excuse my fingerprints on it, this is my Note 4. This has been my go-to phone that I use on a day-to-day basis. Even though I've got a case around it, it is wider. One of the things that I noticed right offhand is, even though they're supposed to be both 5.7-inch screens at 2560 by 1440, the screen on the Note 7 is narrower, if that makes any sense. They both seem to be the same length, but the screen on the Note 7 seems to be a little bit narrower, and that's interesting. But what I have figured is, it's not that it's narrow, it's that because it's wrapped around the edge, it's the equivalent. So keep that in mind. Plus there is no bezel, as there is on the Note 4. And again, I've skipped a model, so I don't know if the Note 5 had less of a bezel. But with some of us who wait till the next, every 2 years to get their phones, that would be the case. So I had to skip it, which I'm glad I did. Some of the other things that are noteworthy, if you're not familiar with its specs, it has a Snapdragon 820, and there's a number of phones that have 820s in them now. It does have a stylus, and unlike the previous version, it doesn't appear that you can plug it in backwards. So that's kind of a cool feature. And again, here it is. And it fits in the bottom. And it's kind of interesting is that if we compare the Note 4 and to the Note 7, let me bring that in, there we go. You can see that it's in the same location. Note 4 is using the micro USB, whereas the Note 7 uses the micro USB for the Note 4, USB-C for the Note 7. And again, reminding those of you, there is an earphone jack on the Note 7. However, it is in a different location. It's on the bottom of the Note 7, unlike the Note 4, which had it on top. I kind of like that personally, because I like to use mine like in a holster. So now my cable's going to have to be below on the bottom and then wrapped up. So I don't know how that'll work out. I haven't got my new holster case for the Note 7. So comparing it to some others, I will go ahead. Here is the original, well, not original, this is the Galaxy S4. So as you can see, it had a smaller screen, about a 5-inch screen. So all together, but notice that the Note 7 is still thinner. It may be difficult to see there, but it is thinner than the the smaller S4. And to compare it to some of the others, here is the big, literally whale Nexus 6, which I actually personally like. But notice that the screen, because it was up close to, it's like a 5.96 inch screen, it is larger. And actually I found from a VR perspective, that is actually probably an optimal screen to have. And I can tell you why in a few minutes. But again, notice the Note 7's narrower. Apologize for having a difficult time with that word. I shouldn't. My wife thinks I have a little country accent. Maybe she's right. But notice that on the Nexus 6, it's larger but also wider. Now let's move to the 6P, which, if you remember, replaced it. Here they are in comparison. Again, the 6P is a little wider, but it's also thicker, but not by much. And this was something I had to keep in consideration when I was designing the NEODiVR uPLAy, because the phones are getting thinner. And I originally had designed it for like the Note 4 and the Nexus, which were fatter. And as they're getting slimmer, obviously the tension arms that I built for it had to be modified, or more importantly, I adjust them slightly in a way that you can use older phones or newer phones. But that's getting past why we're here, which is the Note 7 itself. So physically, it's a nice phone. A lot of people have identified that. But again, how much more can you make a phone look like a slab of glass? Now, some people said that the back is glass. I don't really know if that's the case. So somebody out there, obviously I'm not going to take it apart, and did not analyze that particular portion. But if you look at the camera, it's really not that much different from the previous versions. They've kind of gone with the same unique square element for the bezel for the actual camera. And it's really not that thick. Some people claim that it's not, complain that it's not flush, but I don't seem to have an issue with that. As far as the camera is concerned, man, is it a nice camera. I thought the Note 4 was a nice camera, but that obviously is even better now. So let's jump right to the screen.
And put that right behind me. So the first thing is that you can set this up so that it has an always-on display. And here we have the time and date, and that's like the default. It has both the iris scanner, which people have talked about. I personally have not set that up yet, but I did find, again, because I've skipped a generation, the Note 4 had a fingerprint reader, but it wasn't very good because you actually had to slide your, in my case, the thumb across it, and I didn't always get good results, especially if my finger was wet. So I basically abandoned that. I would have to say, oh, that's something else I wanted to show really quick. Let me jump back to it. For those of you who are iPhone users,
and I haven't seen any direct comparison, but I obviously developing both iPhone 6 Plus, and here we go. Here's a comparison between the Note 7 and the iPhone. Again, it's on, if you notice, the iPhone 6 Plus, or 6S Plus, that's what I have here, is as large as the Galaxy 6, or the Nexus 6, excuse me. So for those of you who have complained about the the iPhone 6S Plus being big, I would have to agree, but there's a direct comparison. Again, the Samsung is not only thinner, it's narrower, the length is about the same, but other than that, it's actually I don't have a scale here, but they're about the same in weight. Maybe the Samsung is a little lighter, and we can look up the technical information later on that. But so again, there's the iPhone 6, and obviously we have the iPhone 7 coming out this year, and we'll see if it probably, most people seem to indicate that it's going to be about the same weight and size of the iPhone 6S Plus. Okay, so now we can jump back to the screen.
So here we go. So obviously the first thing is you press the button, and I can actually have it up and you can actually see it. And then you just place your thumb. Now I've already set it up so I can use my thumbprint. Voila, very quick. And I have a pen, so we can go right into that. If you pull up the pen, it obviously gives you your option menu, just like the previous version, but something that's cool on this one is even if you're in the lock position, it can bring this up, which I think is really nice, and I wish they would have brought it over to the Note 4, because a lot of times I don't want to unlock my phone just to make a note, and I do use that feature because I like to, one, make quick notes, but also I like to create illustrations and, you know, map things out. So when I'm designing, oh, there's my new turret for my tank. No, I'm just kidding. But so essentially, if I have an idea or something, I can immediately pull this out and make some illustration and draw on this. And this is one of the neat features and why I like the Note series so much. Other people have different reasons. The other thing, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is the fact is it has a 5.7-inch screen, which to me is very important, at least for me personally, for VR or mobile VR. So, you know, that's one of the features here. Oops, I guess I'll have to go back. Okay, skip. Okay, here we go. So here are some notes that I had created earlier. I was doing basically taking some notes on the weight. The actual weight of the Note 7 is 6.6 ounces. And then you'll find out later on the new Gear VR is 10.7. And that will play out, especially if you wear one of these mobile VR headsets for any length of time. The more weight that you have on the front of your face, obviously that can be burdensome over time. And then I'll identify actually my uPLAy, my little glasses are 1.9 ounces. And I have strived to make that extremely lightweight, and we'll talk about it. Okay, and I have some other notes there, but let's get back to there we go, to the illustration I had just done. So notice that for whatever reason, there we go, it's now come out, and I can continue to draw on it and then save it and then move on. If you're not familiar with Samsung phones, you have the home key, which you can press to get you back, just like on an iPhone. A lot of people think, oh, they ripped off the iPhone. Yeah, probably. Do I like that feature? I sure do. I do have a couple, as I mentioned, Nexus phones, and I kind of miss that because at least on my Nexus phones, it takes up part of the screen real estate. The other thing is you have soft keys. This I don't like. Well, I shouldn't say I don't like it. All you stay is within the Samsung ecosystem or the Galaxy ecosystem. They have two hot buttons or soft buttons. One, and let's see if they light up here. They actually, and on the left-hand side, brings up the multiple apps, which you can clear up. And on the right-hand side, brings back your return key. And you have, you know, they're highlighted, as you can see here. Or can you see that? No, you can't. But I guess if I bring it up like this, you can see it, barely. Here we go. So they highlight, or they light up a little bit when you touch them. And I personally like that feature. And let's compare it to, let's say, the Nexus 6. As you can see with the soft keys, they're always visible, and you have the same feature, but right now it's locked. So right there's your home key, but notice where your app key is, it's off to the right-hand side here. And the return key, or I guess you'd call it a return key, is on the left-hand side. So that can be extremely confusing, but there's an app out there if you have to use multiple devices that can switch them to make them consistent one way or another. Obviously, I haven't done that, and I keep getting confused by that, but oh well, that's life. So back to the Note 7. You know, basically, what was one of the features that I noticed? I was able to use the NFC feature from my Note 4 and the Note 7 and be able to transfer all the apps, but basically all it does is it assigns them and then it downloads them again from Google. But it also brings over all your passwords. So all of my wireless stuff, because I have multiple Wi-Fi systems here, both in my tech cave as well as upstairs in the standard part of the house, not in the cave itself. So I have 2 or 3. So it brought over all of them, and because I have a short or bad memory, I can't remember the passwords for all of them, and I didn't have to. So that was kind of neat today, because one of the things we're doing today is using Chromecast, and I would have needed the password for the Wi-Fi that I have down here in the tech cave, and the good thing is it brought it all over. So that's a cool feature, but that's nothing new. So what else is new about this? Well, there's some other features. Oh, let's talk about the main concern. A lot of people were concerned, it was in the news this week, that Verizon was going to start adding new apps. Well, I think Verge had covered it in one of their podcasts. The happy news is that was not the case. The apps are about the same, and let's go ahead and bring that up. I have a slew of apps already, but I found that there wasn't that much garbage to it. You know, some people complain that Samsung piles it on as well as Verizon, but I found that that wasn't the case. You know, you've got your S voice, and there is the problem that you can't actually remove them or uninstall them, but you can basically what's the word I want to say? I can't think of it now, but essentially you can block them or prevent them from running, which is what I do with those apps. And it's fairly easy to do. Other than that, if you're familiar with the Samsung phones, the OS system runs very similar to it. You have your hot function keys up here on top, and then you have the gear to bring in your settings, and you know there's a slew of settings, and if you're a developer, setting up development is basically the same way. I did get a system update, but I had to actually force it to update. I don't know. Let's see what we're at now. I'm at 6.01, so I don't know if it came with 6. So I guess that's a positive. Other than that, I think there's some security updates as well. But again, if you're familiar with the Samsung phones, there shouldn't be really anything that'll surprise you with this. It's pretty much straightforward. But from my perspective, this is not why I wanted the phone. I wanted this phone because I wanted to see its potential as a mobile VR device, and I'm happy to say, as I covered 2 weeks ago, with its new diamond pen tile technique, that the screen is superb, as DisplayMate has identified. I mean, it is really nice. Now, is it any better than some of the other screens out there? From my perspective, I don't think so. The Nexus 6P has a very nice screen. And even, you know, I bought a used LG G5, has a nice screen. And if you're not familiar with it, a lot of people talk about LG's AMOLED screens, but I have not noticed that they've used AMOLED screens on some of their premium phones like their G5. This actually is just a IPS LCD screen, but it is a 2560 by 1440. And I don't personally have a huge problem with that, but many people think that that's the direction you should go. One, if you like the brighter, crisper, more colorful screens, but more importantly, especially with the low persistent mode required for VR, that's important. But I don't think that that's much of an issue personally, especially in a mobile, maybe in a high performance VR system like the Oculus or the HTC Vive at 90 Hertz. But frankly, I don't really think you're really pushing these low persistent screens on mobile past 60. So I don't see the real huge benefits between LCD and AMOLED, other than, again, better low persistence and crisper color. But sometimes I feel, especially on the iPhone 6, that the standard RGB sub-pixel matrix provides a little bit crisper image, and even at 1080p. But I think it's well made up for with the newer screens like that I have here with the Note 7. Okay, so let's bring something up. My favorite right now is this NVIDIA VR viewer, and if you can see, I have an actual screen set up so that I could use my little NEODiVR uPLAy with it, or microplay, depending on how you want to say that. And I found that it was extremely crisp, and the actual image was excellent. And the 5.7 inch screen for me actually makes a huge difference. It adds a little bit more, and the important thing is in a mobile environment, and I'll get to the Gear VR in just a moment, is immersion. And the larger screens help you provide that. And I also feel that the Gear VR compromised because they wanted to make sure that it also worked with the S7, which is a smaller, I think that's like a 5.2, and then you have the Galaxy S7 Edge, which is a 5.5, and then finally the 5.7. So you had to compromise in order to make sure that your immersion is available for all the different phones, and I'll tell you why in a second. So, you know, there's that. As you can see, I mean, it's probably making you sick, but it's pretty fluid and responsive. I did notice that I didn't find it that much more responsive over some of the other phones, like again the 6P, which has been out for a year, using the Snapdragon 810. It seemed just as responsive, and the LG 8, which uses a Snapdragon 820, was extremely responsive as well. But again, they're all using internal IMUs. And I did notice after a while on most of these, if you run any of these VR apps, it does seem to create more drift, more heat, so there seems to be more drift. I noticed this in particular in the Nexus 6P. So I'm hoping with the newer Daydream VR devices that won't be an issue, and we should see some improvements there, because you know, drift can make you sick. All right, so let's take a look at the new Gear VR, but before I do, let's look at the old one. Now, if you remember, some time ago, I actually took apart, and let me jump back to my screen.
So here is the old version, and one of the things that's extremely important is they went with the new Gear VR with a dark blue exterior but also interior, and one of the reasons for that, and I totally agree with it, is the white surface there actually can cause reflections and create some artifacts that, let me make sure that's in the screen there. Okay. So that could be an issue. Again, they made compromises so this thing could work with all of the X6 series of phones, including the S7. Again, remember those were all micro USB, so they then finally decided to create a newer device. The lenses, I think, if I remember correctly, are about 38 millimeters. So they're not that much larger in the new version, but one of the things is because they're a little bit larger, you'll see that they actually made a cutout where the nose areas, the bridge of the nose goes. So again, here's the old version that I had torn apart to make something new with it, but pretty much the same. So the box is unassuming, has a little bit of advertising on it. There you go. You can see there, little screen. And there's not much in there. It also includes an adapter, so that was kind of neat. It has a special adapter, so let me go ahead and bring it out. So here it is. So again, it's this dark blue color, which I think is very attractive. There you go. We'll bring it back to my main screen again.
So it's really attractive. At least I think it's attractive. It's lightweight, and you can notice I identified the weight earlier. It's about 10 ounces, which I think is fairly lightweight. The band isn't very, what would you call it? I wouldn't say cheap, but it's simple and it's basic. I think they could have provided a little bit more comfort like they did in the original version. And in fact, I think it's a little bit thinner. Yeah, it's actually a little thinner than the previous version. Now, some people like this new foam here, if you can see that. And it's actually kind of like a terry cloth exterior on it. It's probably a synthetic to help avoid sweat, which still seems to be a problem. I'm not a big fan of these face huggers for obvious reasons. But if we look inside of it, and let me go back to
that screen. As you can see, it's completely dark in there. And there we go. You can see that they now cut out part of the lens itself. So they're a little large. In fact, they're about 40 millimeters. About 38 millimeters for the previous version, and these are about 40 millimeters. And if you notice, there's this little sensor here in the middle between the two eyes. That's to provide proximity sensing so that your phone is not on when you take this off your face, which I think is a nice idea. Sometimes it gets in the way because you might want to monitor it, as we'll see in a moment. So other than that, let me jump back so you can see the fit.
So it's really lightweight. The lenses are sharp, but I'm thinking they're probably out of acrylic or polycarbonate, and they do seem to have a lot of chromatic aberrations like the previous, but they are sharp. And as in Google VR and the Oculus system, they don't seem to correct for chromatic aberration, or at least that wasn't what I noticed, and it did seem pretty severe. I noticed with my lenses, I do have some chromatic aberrations, but they're towards the edges of the lenses. I found that they were really close in this system here. Again, that's just a minor thing. The other thing that I found, that some others have pointed out, it seemed like you were looking through binoculars again. So again, I think that's the compromise. So if we open this up here, this little plate comes out. If I can drag, okay, there we go. And I suggest hanging on to this, because if you don't and you don't have your phone in there, obviously your lenses are exposed to the environment and you could get dust and so forth in there. So make sure you hang on to that. It is not transparent, so essentially you don't use it. In fact, since it fits into that cavity, you can't have it on your phone unlike previous versions. And I have to agree, that really didn't make a lot of sense, and plus the phone is not too bad. So again, as mentioned, what makes this one unique is it has this USB-C, but can be removed, and I'll do that really quick. And we'll jump back to
this camera. I have it on manual focus. So let's see. So there's a lock-unlock button that allows you to remove it. So let me go ahead and do that. There. And then you can remove it, which I just did. And then you just have some fingers, gold-plated fingers, and then you just attach the other attachment for the USB, micro USB. So it's that easy, and they're both included. So, but it does come default with the USB-C, which makes sense. Make sure that you lock it. I had forgotten to do so, and
had some problems with it falling off when I was trying to put on the Samsung Note 7, but that's just probably my ignorance. Okay, so to put it in there, it's really straightforward, and if you're familiar with the old Gear VR, it's done the same way. And one of the cool things is that the Chromecast actually works, so you'll actually be able to see what the screen looks like when it comes up. For whatever reason, though, it does not seem to work in real time, so I can only get like static shots, but we'll be able to take a look at a few things. All right, so I'm going to plug it in, and what I would suggest is to plug it in while it's still angled up, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. Plug it in, and then push it down, and make sure the other side is open, and then all you need to do is push it down. It locks into place like that, and it's held into place just like that. So there you go. So now that it's in place, as I mentioned, there's a proximity sensor, and I'm going to go ahead and put my finger over it to bring it up, and we should be able to see. So this is what you would see inside. Notice the stereo or the bi images there. So one of the things, let's see if it actually comes up and you can see it. Yeah. So if you notice, it tells me that my phone is locked. So I need to remove it and unlock the phone, which sadly you have to pull it out, unlock it, and then put it back in. Okay, so now so as mentioned, I'm not going to be able to actually show this with any motion because for whatever reason it only captures one frame and then sends it out to the Chromecast. But at least I can do this. I don't know of any other way to do it, but I think this is a little bit more than what's out there already. So let's see if it's come up. Okay. So there's a little safety message that comes up. All right, so there we go. I don't know what's coming up. Some images of that I did earlier. So as I mentioned, the proximity switch can be a pain if you want to show it off like I am, but obviously it makes sense. It keeps your battery from depleting. Another good thing with the Gear VR, this new version, is it does have the ability to plug in an additional power supply, and we could try that here in a moment. All right, let's see, my main screen is back up. It is, and we should see an update on my screen here. There we go. So this is what it looks like inside. And again, the immersion is better. As they identify, I think it's close to like a, what, 109? No, maybe not that much. Well, it's over 100 degrees now, and I would have to agree with it. However, because the lenses are only, what did I say, 40 millimeters, they still are visible in your peripheral, so it does appear that you're still looking through binoculars. So kind of keep that in mind if that may or may not be an issue for you. But they are nice. Keep in mind that the Gear VR is $99, so it's not like it's cheap. And so that should be something to keep in mind as well. But there is a much better ecosystem. But like I said, I've had the older version with the Note 4, and I haven't seen that much difference. There is this new little game, if you look down in the bottom right hand side of the screen, that what is it, for a Suicide Squad. It's kind of like a little, they use like a cell shader, so it looks like a cartoon, but some of the characters from Suicide Squad, and then the idea is to shoot a bunch of I don't know what, trolls. I don't remember what they were called. I haven't seen the movie. That was kind of fun, and it doesn't last that long. Some of the other things, and we might be able to bring it up, so let me put it on real quick and bring something up. Let's go to the library, and we'll do some 360 videos. So one thing I want to bring up, let's see if it'll bring up, there you go. So you get this nice menu, and notice the background around it. And again, this is all floating in front of your face. So they've done, in my opinion, a very good job with the UI, and it's very comfortable and very easy to use. On the right-hand side is your touchpad. Some people have said that it's designed better than the previous version. It's about the same, I think. You have your return button and your home button. And then you have a volume control up here. So it's fairly intuitive. And I guess there's a gamepad that you can get with this as well. At least there was a tutorial that you could go through, which I don't have. I just have a standard gamepad, which I guess would work just as well. In fact, I kind of like the one that I have. Haven't tried it yet. So let's actually bring up one of these 3D demos. This one's kind of nice. All right, so let's bring it up. So again, let's see, we can probably blank it, and then it should refresh. So that gives you an idea. Even though I can't rotate it in real time, I did change the positioning. So this is what you're seeing internally. And again, the screen is very bright. The lenses, I think, are a little too sharp. They do show some subpixels, or actually pixels. Some of you may have heard of it as the screen door effect, but it's not that significant. I really like the fact these high density screens, some people think going to 4K would be way too much, but what I've mentioned is, well, why don't we just use 4K in order to reduce the size of the pixels and then scale up? And you know, we may get a little bit of aliasing, but we can handle that with some anti-aliasing. But what that would do is pretty much remove these pixels. I mean, they're almost gone now, but a 4K screen would literally remove that. But I think this is still an ideal screen. It works really well. In fact, it has a higher resolution than the Oculus or the HTC Vive, which is 2160 by 1200, where this is 2560 by 1440. So other than that, it's nice. So if you got an extra $100, or hopefully they will offer this, and they may not because they're offering the 256 gigabyte card and the or a Fitbit. They may not be offering this free, but at $100, and if you have a Note 7, I would get it. Sadly, it does not work. I did try to use a micro USB to USB-C port on my previous version. It did not recognize it. So if you have the old Gear VR, sadly, it will not work with the Note 7. In fact, well, obviously, I pulled mine all apart, but because of the way this is set up, it would not have the ability to extend it. So there's no way physically you could use it. And so I was hoping, because mine was all exposed, that I'd be able to use it, but that was not the case. So other than that, it's pretty comfortable. I played with it for about an hour. Didn't feel that it was too excessive or weighty on the the head. There are adjustable straps. They use Velcro. You can choose to use the top of the head strap or not. That can be removed, but basically Velcro, this nice terry cloth type material, so it kind of wicks sweat, and I did feel after about an hour that my face was sweating, but that seems to be the case with all HMDs. And let's see what else. Controls are pretty intuitive. Getting it in was, I'm kind of clumsy, but it seemed to be pretty intuitive after a few times. I think I could get in and out pretty well. I didn't mention it. There's a focus control on top. IPD, though, is set, and I didn't actually measure that, but I'm pretty sure it's probably, oh, look, we have a new screen. So, and there's tons of these from oToy and V-Ray, as well as a bunch of 360s. There's also some cool ones from the Rio Olympics that make you actually feel like you're there. I didn't actually try out some of the videos. Obviously, there's a few games out there. I still think some of these games are way too expensive, especially if you're used to the games in either the iPhone or the Android ecosystem. The other thing is, and I didn't try it, a lot of people have complained, but I think there are utilities out there to push it over to Google, and there is some thoughts of Google VR coming to an Android phone supposedly in October, but that will only be an international ROM. So like this phone I bought from Verizon, and if you're a Verizon customer, you know what I'm talking about. Verizon takes forever. Supposedly they're checking the ROMs before sending them out. I don't know what they're really doing, but it takes a long time. So don't expect probably an update to Android 7 or Android N or Android Nougat with Google VR until probably the first or second quarter of 2017, if we're lucky. More than likely, it'll probably be my, I didn't do it with my Note 4, but I probably will root this device, or maybe not even root it. I'll just unlock it and put another ROM on there, maybe Cyanogen, or maybe the ASOP ROM, or actually this international, if it comes out in a version that will work with this, so that I can run it with Google VR. Or more than likely, I'll just buy the next Nexus 7, but I've heard it's only a 5.5 inch screen. But it will be 2560. So it'll be about the same size as the screen on an iPhone, and however, a much sharper screen. But if the rumor is true on the iPhone 7, maybe the new iPhone 7 Plus will have a 25 by 60 by 1440 screen. But I've only seen 2 sources that identify that rumor, so that probably won't go anywhere. Who knows? So there you go. So to compare it to some other devices that are out there, if you remember, I talked about the BoboVR, and you can get this for about $35 now. It actually has better lenses, a little bit larger, and if you notice the holes are, it's a nice $35 headset. It actually has built-in speakers. I like it. I do feel that one of the things that I noticed with the Gear VR is getting your face closer to the lenses, and I'll explain to you in a minute and why I designed my uPLAy to do that. The closer your eyes are to the lenses, the more immersive the experience, because one, you don't see the ridges. And I think that's one of the things that breaks that immersion the most, is because otherwise you're always looking through binoculars. And even though these lenses are a little bit larger, your distance from the lenses is further than on the Gear VR. And here I can give you a comparison. So if you can see, let me put this to an angle. Okay. So if you notice, here is the Gear VR, and notice where the nose bridge is, and notice where it is on this. Let's see if I can do it. See the distance there? So even though you have one thicker foam, so it can't compress close enough. And some of the people have complained about that with the HTC Vive, and actually have trimmed down the foam in order to bring their eyes closer. And so there's an option. There's a few other. Humido has come out with, or Humido has come out with a new headset, a little bit larger. Actually, it is larger than their previous version, but it's $79 or $80. So it's not that much cheaper than a Samsung. So unless you don't have a Samsung phone, but you would be listening to this, if you weren't planning to get one, I probably would recommend not buying the Humido and buying that. But if you wanted something that you could put in your pocket, yes, we're going to turn this into an advertisement. You can get the NEODiVR MicroPlay or uPLAy. I think I like uPLAy better. Essentially, this is going out for beta to a few developers and bloggers so that they can hopefully write something nice about it. But let's grab that phone. I guess it's still in here. The Note 7. And see what it looks like. So one of the things that I have found that I could actually create a visual profile for this, and if you can see me here, so I can easily put it on. It slides on. Because it is narrower, the actual arms on this, which was made for Note 4 iPhone, is a little bit larger, and what that did is kind of made it too wide. So essentially you want to make sure the bottom of the legs. So let's find something. So if you notice, this is the actual profile that I use. And again, this is a Google Cardboard or Google VR profile. And since you can't use Google VR on anything but Android 7 or Android Nougat, you basically only have a cardboard profile, but they're very similar. Notice that the actual image there is square versus the elliptical images in the Gear VR, and the reason for that is the lenses that I use here are larger, and more importantly, if you can see my screen, let me see if I move it. My eyes are basically up against the lenses themselves. So what that does is it brings the frames of the lens very close to your eyes, so they're almost non-existent. So it's like looking into a new panel. And that was the big reason that I designed it, other than for the flexibility and portability. But as you know, if you've been following the show, if not, one of the other things that I wanted to design was a headset, or excuse me, a bracket so you could put your phone in it. And let's see, this is not the one. bring it. Oh well. Here we go. So here's the actual bracket adjusted for it, and I built it to hold the phone, and it can be adjusted for whatever phone you want. Well, I don't know which one I adjusted to it. Oh well. I think this will go with the Nexus 7. Oh, that's what I did. I adjusted it. One of the things that I also don't like, if you noticed when I put the Note 7 in to the Gear VR, you have to take covers or protective covers. Now, I'm the kind of guy that's clumsy, so I make sure that I have something, and I like to actually use those holsters. Yeah, I know they're not very, what do you want to call it, chic, or I guess they're super geeky, but I don't care anymore. I guess I'm old enough to not care. But let me bring one of these up. So I have something to always protect my phone, and you know, frankly, I've never broken a screen, and I have dropped mine. In fact, when I went to Austin, 2 years ago, or no, actually it was last year, I dropped it out into the street. I mean, I thought it was completely going to be fractured and broken, but thankfully it was not. So now that I have the correct TPU on the phone itself, I can then put it in here. There, now it snaps in. So that's what it would look like. And then you put it on your head. Now this is the stiff fabric version. I also am working on a nylon version, but notice I have a battery pack that I can plug into it, and it actually helps to provide some support. So again, it's probably not the most elegant looking thing to put on your head, but it is very compact. And I like the fact is that it floats in front of your eyes. And again, I've used several of these headsets that I call face huggers. And one of the things that has always driven me nuts is these face huggers always enclose your face and make your face sweat, or at least my face sweats. And I didn't like that. All right, so I've put it on. The other cool thing, demos never always, or at least, so let's bring the screen up. So this is what you're seeing, or I'm seeing. Okay, so again, this is about 4 to 5 ounces lighter. I have a battery in the back of it. You may be able to see it once I plug it in. And the cool thing is, this is a 3500 milliampere battery, but I do have a couple of others that fit the same form factor. One that's a little bit lighter, but it provides some balance. Okay. So there you go. So as mentioned, I do have a nylon band that I've been working on. So it pretty much just drapes on like that and does the same thing very quickly. But there you go. That's the unboxing of this cool little neat Gear VR. I highly recommend it. And the Note 7, which is now inside the uPLAy, but Note 7, excellent phone. I can't wait to try out and I don't know if they're going to call it the Nexus 7 or what they're going to call it, if they're going to continue with that. I can't wait to try that out. It will use either the Snapdragon 820 or an 821, or maybe even an 823, which might be a little bit faster. Other than that, as mentioned earlier, the IMUs seem to drift a little bit as they warm up, so hopefully they have that rectified. One of the cool things again about the Gear VR Samsung Note 7 or the Galaxy series is the IMU is separate, so drift is not as much of a problem, and they may have put actually a little bit more money into the IMU than what's been in phones, but I don't think that will be the case with the Daydream. So on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you for listening or watching, and hopefully there was some good information out of that. And I'll see you next Friday, and I'll have even more of a report. I'm going to create a little demo using both Google VR as well as Gear VR, and do a little bit of comparison, then look at the persistence as well as some of the lag. I have noticed that Google VR, especially on a phone that is not Google VR ready, for instance just cardboard ready, seems to have a little bit more lag for the same type of thing that I've created in Unreal, both for the Gear VR and Unreal. And actually, I'll tell you what, let's see if I can bring it up real quick. I have played with, let's see if it's here. One of the really good tests for me is, it's called the Sun Temple. There it is. So let's bring that up. And you can see for yourself, it's laggy, and I think this particular version, there you go. So you can see that it's a little bit laggy, and this is on an 820. And, oh, I did bring it. So with a little gamepad, I can move around. If it recognizes it. Yeah, it's not seeing it. Oops, that was nice. All right, let's try this again. So I will try some others here shortly, but okay. So there, now I can move around, and if I had it on my head, I can move upstairs. But, I mean, maybe not this model, but maybe the next model. I guess I should just put that in front of my, oh, that was good. It just went dark on me. Oh well, that's time for me. That gives you a little bit of a teaser for next Friday. But I am going to create a specific Gear VR version of that and see how it compares with the version there, which is a Google VR cardboard version, and see how well it works. I do know when I created the Sun Temple and a previous, actually you weren't able to see that. I had the wrong screen up. Oh well. So with that being said, that's a teaser for Friday, and thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.